Hi, welcome to the Valley Startups podcast. Today we're going to be talking to Hart Shafer, the CEO and founder of TheraSpecs. Hart, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. And honestly, your product is definitely true to home, home to me. My stepfather suffers from chronic migraines, and it's definitely a point of pain for many people. And I think that we're all very excited to hear about your product. So let's get started. Tell me about the TheraSpecs story.
Well, so we got started. So my wife has chronic migraine as well. And so for years, we've been looking for something that would help her out. And she's tried sort of everything you can think of. And but there was years ago, now almost 10 years ago, we were seeing her neurologist actually at the Mayo Clinic, and she was wearing a pair of sunglasses at the appointment. And the neurologist said, "Totally know why you're doing that, right? That makes sense. But you should know that wearing sunglasses indoors can actually make your light sensitivity worse over time because your body dark adapts." And he was the first one to mention special tinted lenses for migraine and other light sensitive conditions. We hadn't heard of that before, and we did some research, and it sounded really good for especially what she experienced, like going to Target or another big box store or something like that and getting a migraine triggered from the lighting. And but it was hard for us to find somebody to buy these glasses from. And then when we finally bought them, they took weeks to get here. When we got them, the lenses were helpful, but the frames were cheap, and they were very flimsy, let in a lot of light. And it was as simple as thinking, I don't know about glasses, but I think I could do better than that. And so I really just started researching. It was at first just for her, and she's an advocate and a blogger in the space, and so she knew a lot of other people who had similar troubles, and so we made a few pair for them as well. And the feedback was really over the top, and that's when decided I don't think anybody else is going to do this right, and so it's when I jumped in.
So, I mean, did you have any background in this before, or was this really kind of doing research and just trying to improve it? Like, how'd you get into this?
Well, so I mean, my background is in product management, product development. Generally, I always thought I was going to start a company to be a software company. I worked for software. I worked for Adobe before, another company before moving back to Phoenix. And then I had little things. So my father is an ophthalmologist, and so I grew up in a house with an anatomical model of the eye, right? Like just around. And I was never that was never my calling, but it just sort of absorbed. And similarly, my bachelor's degree is in physics, and so I have some of the basic baseline optics knowledge and things like that, but I didn't know how to read a prescription or what was going on with frames or where to get that. And so that was the part where I really just had to dive in and start learning about what I could do, and finding optical labs that would work with me, just even to create those initial prototypes that were for carry specifically.
So, I mean, it seems like it really went into, solving a problem for your direct immediate need and then solving a problem for individuals within the community. At what point did you kind of branch out and start selling to people that you didn't know?
Well, it was probably 4 months between the time that we sent them out to people who weren't Carrie, my wife, and when I actually decided to start the company. And so it was, but it was pretty fast feedback from those people that I had that initial thought about. I think that I need to do this. And then I guess it was that 4 months that it took to actually think about, well, what would it mean to launch this, and how would I go about doing it, and at least get started with something that I could test the waters with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a really quick. You were able to test the waters with your family and the immediate people that needed it. Obviously, you got overwhelming, positive feedback. At what point did you really kind of make the jump and say, okay, this is a business, this is something that we can do?
Right. So a big part of it is, and this is where having sort of product development knowledge from before comes in. I went through after I had that initial from the people that we just happened to know. I started to actually like find and interview some other people and talk to them about their light sensitivity, their experience. At the time, it was all migraine, and now migraine's just sort of one of the things that we address. But did customer interviews and all the way up through sort of that, like I'm trying to remember. Somebody recently called it, but I actually did a test where it wasn't the TheraSpecs brand, but built a little website and had a picture of TheraSpecs on them and a buy button with a price, and just to see, and then ran some Google ads to see if I could get people who were not somebody who knew me personally or I had just talked to actually engage with the value proposition. And it was when those tests started to convert that I thought, okay, well, I can actually communicate what this is and what it's for and why you would want it to somebody who's never met me before. And that was when sort of pulled the trigger and moved from thinking about it to just, spending all my time trying to make it happen.
Yeah. And I think depending on the timing that you started, I would be super curious to see how that testing went kind of during the pandemic when everyone was probably getting more migraines staring at screens.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it would be totally different. And I mean, this was years ago. We sold our first pair in 2012. And the pandemic's been really interesting because there's been this enormous increase in screen usage, but an enormous decrease in the amount of people actually going out to the places that are lit by those terrible fluorescent lighting, their terrible lights. And it turns out that for us, the most acute trigger for most people is bad lighting at work or school or at a store. And so we actually had a big fall off in the number of people for a while who were searching for, finding, buying TheraSpecs, especially when the shutdown was most intense last year. And we've rebounded since, but we can tell that sort of the number of people actually out and about goes down. And similarly, it's funny, we actually, like, our soft season is the summer because, and we think it's because people are generally not under those terrible lights nearly as often as they are the rest of the year, because both they're out in the sun and also the sun's up longer and so on. So yeah, it's been quite the ride through that.
And I mean, I'll even admit, not embarrassing at all, but I don't wear glasses, but there are some outfits that I actually have a pair of, like, light blocking glasses that I actually wear with it. And I think that this concept of, glasses, there's benefit, but it's also becoming so much more mainstream and almost like a fashion statement at some point of, kind of the look that you have, you want to, capture a certain look. What would you say is the major kind of makeup of your demographic? I guess is my ultimate question. Is it people who truly, need the product because they have migraines, people who just don't like the lighting, people who like the way glasses look? I mean, what does that breakout look like?
Yeah. So most people who buy TheraSpecs, because TheraSpecs are tinted lenses, need them for something. They feel like they have a pretty intense need. And this is where, like, most blue light blocking glasses actually block a very small percentage of blue light. We're talking, single digits. And they're clear. Now they block a lot of the light, which is almost ultraviolet, right? Like, it's right there at the edge, but that's actually not what, for instance, gives people or might trigger headaches or migraines or weakness, things like that. It's a little further up in the spectrum. And so we have people, I think that most of the people who we sell glasses to now do have something that they've identified, but we have an enormous chunk who say, I don't have a diagnosed condition. I just know that the light from my computer or the light at work makes me feel gross. And so they've bought TheraSpecs to try to help with that. And it was one of the things we did very early on, is making sure that we had a really easy return policy so that people could try it out and see if this did anything for them, and they wouldn't worry about being stuck with something that didn't work for them. But now we have a wide range from migraine and concussion, or any kind of brain injury, again, all the way through that. I don't have anything diagnosed. I clearly need something that to make me not feel gross after I've done a day of work or gone to the store.
Wow. So, I mean, I would love just kind of a general case study example. So let's take my stepfather, for example. He gets chronic migraines when he walks into restaurants that has a lot of fluorescent light, ceiling fans that are, flipping around, things like that.
Yeah.
He doesn't necessarily need glasses, but he does use reading glasses. What product or service would you recommend for someone like that?
Yeah, I mean, he sounds like a great candidate for TheraSpecs. So I guess taking a step back, what the research shows is that there's a certain band of wavelengths, which is not like all the way at the deepest part of blue, but is, up near where it starts to turn green. Naming colors is kind of a construct, so it's hard to say, but around 480 nanometers, technically speaking. And it's light around there that is most likely to trigger the symptoms or an attack of something like a condition like migraine. And so by taking that out, right, what we're doing is lowering the total amount of stimulus the brain's getting that might trigger that response. And so for somebody like him, we could get just a normal pair of glasses that he could wear, non-prescription, that he could wear whenever he was around the lighting that was trouble. And then we can do things like make readers or put a bifocal into lenses, because we can either sell over the counter as you were non-prescription. We also have the ability to do lenses or reader lenses if somebody requests them.
Cool. So would it just be kind of like him, going to your website, or do you guys have a phone number that people have to call? What does that experience look like when someone decides, yes, I want this product?
Sure. I mean, the value from our website. And we do have a phone number and toll-free number and all that for anybody who has questions about it, wants to get a hold of our team and ask questions or needs to be walked through anything. But otherwise, we're an e-commerce business, 99%. We have some healthcare provider who sell our product. So again, actually just the non-prescription, non-corrective lens versions. But then we work with an optical lab, actually, in order to actually get glasses made for anybody who has a custom order.
Yeah, I think that's a really useful experience, and frankly, for me, it's intimidating when you're going to an eye doctor or you're going into those places, making the appointment. If the issue is migraines, that's something that you can kind of figure out. Okay, it's this. I know that I always get a migraine when I go into J.C. Penney, and it's a combination of the light and the smells, and I think that that's definitely a real problem that people are facing.
Yeah, and it's really hard too, because a lot of people talk doctor or go to doctor, and they don't know anything about light as a trigger. And so there are people who come to us and actually say, you're the first people who have any information or making me feel like I'm not crazy, talking about this fluorescent lighting or something like that being a trigger for me. And so a lot of what we do as well is just we spend a lot of time and energy on education, both on articles and writing on our website, and making sure that the people who are answering our phones know a lot about what the research actually says about how light can be a trigger.
I was just about to ask how much of your business is not necessarily sales, but education.
Right. I mean, it's we think of it as buy TheraSpecs, you're buying more than masses, right? Because you're getting access to some of our expertise and research, and it's like we don't know. We're not doctors. We don't have that depth of knowledge to actually care for people. But the amount of research that we've done focused in this one area is, I think, unparalleled. And so we pulled together a lot of resources. And so we can talk to people about things like, well, what are the things that actually, seem to bring this on, and talk to them about the fact that, when you remove all the light, it's not like all the problem goes away. Like, you remove the light trigger and it's not like your father-in-law would not have migraine anymore. But by reducing the triggers, you can get to the point where they don't show up as often, right? And so, but you might have other triggers, and it's one of the things about conditions like migraine or like post concussion syndrome, where it's the addition of all the different things that are happening. So you mentioned going to JCPenney and the lighting and the smells and things like that. It's by lowering one of those things, we just make it a lot less likely that you'll sort of tip over the edge into, the attack of whatever's happening.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are so many other factors that can go into it. I mean, it could be, you don't get a migraine, you get a migraine because you haven't drank water recently.
That's right.
That's
Exactly.
another big trigger. And, it's almost like my son, when he's playing with Legos, he can throw 100 Legos on the floor. If I clean up half of them, I've got a 50% less chance of stepping on a Lego, but the risk is still there. It's just about kind of managing and taking away some of those factors.
That's right. And so a neurologist once explained it to me about how we have this, and he said basically this bucket in the back of our brain that where all the stimulus from both in our bodies and outside our bodies comes to, and the bucket constantly filling up and then being emptied by our brain, like processing the signals. And what happens with migraine is that if your bucket gets to the point where it overflows, the migraines and the electrical storm in your brain and things happen. This is actually very similar to epilepsy, and I think there are actually a bunch of neurological disorders that have similar but different mechanisms, but they're similar. And so anything that you can do that sort of slows down how much that bucket is filling up makes an enormous difference. And so for some people, if light is their primary trigger, it's the thing that fills them up mostly, it feels like they're cured, right? Like that they had this complete change. But for others, it's just, like including my wife, where it helps. She uses them all the time. She still has attacks, right? It's not like she's it's all done and she's still searching for and finding other things. But everything that you get that actually helps you get more, because a lot of these things like migraines beget migraines, and with concussion, the more you can get back to your normal routine, the faster you heal. So anything that we can do that helps sort of get people back to whatever it is that they need or love to do is what it's all about.
Yeah, definitely. And, I heard you say you started in 2012 and we are now in 2021, thank goodness. That is a long journey, and you have to be, pretty well into the development of your business. Was there ever a point between now and then when you were like, that's it, I don't know if this is going to happen, like, let's talk about the lows and then we'll talk about the highs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that anybody who, like, especially as a business like ours, bootstrapping, I think anybody who says they didn't is probably lying. Especially in those early years, we're talking about basically, creating a market for something that people didn't know existed and don't know to look for. And so we have a product, and we know that if we get to the person who needs it, we know it works, and it works well. And we knew that from the very beginning. But our challenge has always been, how do we scalably find and connect with the people who need the product? And especially for those first couple of years where, it's like, I mean, I laugh about it now, but, we'd go like run a test transaction on the website because it'd been a few days since anybody had bought a pair. And we we're like, is something broken? No. And it's like almost never was it actually broken. And then there were times when I was like, I don't think that we're gonna, like, this work, I don't think this is sustainable. I don't think it's possible to sort of coalesce this market and actually find these people need this. And there were a few times that I would say that I was within, I mean, as close as days to calling it, right? Every time, like within, I don't know, whenever it was, when I was like really doubting, I would get an incredibly heartfelt email from somebody saying, thank you so much. I thought I was going to have to quit job, or I would never could be able to go back to work or school, or go back to, singing choir, or any of these things that they loved. And every time that was enough for me to think, okay, well, this is like, there are more of these people out there. Like I'm going to stick with it for a little while longer. And luckily, there was never one breakthrough, right? I don't have the and then this happened, and then we were rolling. But slowly, we built up word of mouth. We built up relationships with healthcare providers, doctors, and others who refer patients to us, and sort of got the word out. And sort of at some point, that threshold where it was no longer a doubt whether we were going to. It's just about, well, how do we find more and more and more, and how do we keep growing?
And I love it so much that you were able to, recognize a point where you're like, okay, maybe we've reached this point, but then being able to refer back to the customers that you have or people that you've helped, and then have that kind of drive you forward. And I think that is truly rewarding, to be able to have crafted a product that's truly, changed someone's life. I mean, having someone think that they were having to give up on one of their passions, and then having the solution be, oh, wear glasses. And it's a game changer.
Yeah, it's and now we've got some automated channels in our Slack where systems pipe in feedback from customers, and we can also post win and other things that we get when somebody emails or it comes in from somewhere else. But it from I'd go weeks, and then I'd get an email, and we'd go week, right? And now all day long we get net promoter score feedback, cranking in, and just showing up in that feedback channel. And so it is it's incredibly gratifying because for this I worked on, I think, some pretty cool stuff. I had the opportunity, again, working for people who are making, and working at Adobe in the group. I worked in as audio and video, that was very gratifying and cool, but nothing has compared to, having a product where I understand what people are going through. I see it with my wife. I have migraine myself, so I know what that feels like. I know a bunch of people who have had brain injuries and sort of witnessed that as well. And so being able to, help and get that kind of direct feedback it's been awesome. And it's certainly that it kept me going early on, and it makes it very clear why doing this, why this matters.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. The more and more that I interview people on this podcast, the concept becomes clear. There's 3 key metrics of success. And the first one is that the person who started the company has an immediate tie to something. He has an immediate driver or factor that is completely relevant for that person being the startup. The second part, it is, zeroing in on that specific niche area, and then just leaning into it as much as you can. The broader, if it was, I'm just going to create glasses, I'm going to create glasses for everyone, that's where it seems like it starts to fail. It's, death by vertical, they say, but, just leaning in specifically into that specific vertical, that specific group. And then the third thing that I keep hearing is bootstrapping. And, I think that when a company starts, it's about figuring out how far you can go yourself. And then, the person I just interviewed previously, Fobe, he had said that the best investor that you can have within your company is your own product, something that can continually go and feed back in. And it seems like you really have all of those components within your product.
I think so. And it's, on the bootstrapping, I think that they're raising money is, and that is a great tool, but starting always with bootstrapping, I think is at least some, because what you get better at is, when you raise money first, you get better at spending money, right? You're going to spend your money more wisely. But when you're bootstrapping, you learn very quickly how to make it, right? How to connect, how to do, what to do, right? And so that when you finally do, if you ever do raise money and things like that, if you've bootstrapped at all first, you have so much better idea about how to spend that money, right? And then that relates to what you were saying about, like, it's much better to go deep with a narrow group than wide, right? At least to start, because once you really, have super fans in that narrow group, it's much easier to expand from that. And so one of the things about bootstrapping is, by necessity, you figure out how to narrow your focus and keep that focus narrow. And it becomes its own forcing function. I always, like, when I left the last company, it's like, you move from, we work for a big company, it's we have all the money in the world, but I can't decide how to spend it. And when you're bootstrapping, you have no money at all, but you get to do anything you want with it, right? Like, and so the learning cycle can be very, very fast that way.
Yeah, I mean, true. I think that that's one of the best ways to go. And again, the narrow group, it's better. It's kind of like would you rather have a small group of rock stars or an entire, group of people who could take it or leave it? The loyal ones are going to be the ones that write the Google reviews, the ones that tell their friends, the ones that come back. If you can build up with that core of your member base and then expand, that's definitely the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree.
So, I mean, kind of my last two questions that I'm going to ask you, one is going to be, your market, although it is very specific, do you sense a lot of competitors in your area?
Well, so it really depends on what you mean by competitor. We have a couple people who are trying to do the same thing with the tinted lenses, although I don't actually worry about sort of that direct competitor basically at all. And it's not even just, we are, I think, all indications are we're the, one player in that space. And so I don't think there's an existential threat from them taking our customers. But also, our number one competition is non-consumption. It's people who don't know about the product, don't know that they could do anything about it, or are substituting with sunglasses and don't know that there's problems with that, especially inside, or that they could do better outside, things like that. Or people who are now buying, blue light glasses, which, the thing that you get from one of the, clear looking or very light yellow looking glasses, it's not that they don't do anything, but they're very focused on a specific kind of health, right? Which is different than filtering out those wavelengths that actually might cause or trigger symptoms for what we're talking about here. And so, but people don't know that, and so they've tried, Felix Gray or Warby Parker blue blockers, or just from their optometrist, whatever. They're like, oh well, the blue light glasses didn't do anything for me, and so, but they have no idea that what we're doing is orders and orders of magnitude more filtering of very specific wavelengths in order to help. And so that's really our competition, and trying to get out there and just make it known with the people who could use us most.
Yeah, makes all the sense in the world. And then kind of my closing question is just, how can people learn more about your company? How can people purchase your product? Do research on the services that you have? Like, how can people educate themselves and figure out if this is the right decision for them?
Well, everything that you said, I think first stop is always our website, TheraSpecs.com. By going through there, we've got lots of information about both how the product works, as well as the specifics about all the different styles and things that we offer. We have both an indoor and an outdoor lens. So the indoor lens is light enough that it doesn't cause that dark adaptation problem that I mentioned earlier. So you don't have the increase in sensitivity. And then the outdoor lens is dark, like it's a sunglass lens, because out in the bright light, it's appropriate to have a dark lens like that. And it's also polarized to cut down on that reflected glare. And so for anybody who finds that, sunglasses don't quite cut it for them, that the outdoor lens is good. We get people all the time who used to wear ski goggles or like 2 pairs of sunglasses. And it was so dark, can't really dive or otherwise function, but But the outdoor lens, by focusing again on those wavelengths that are most dramatic, can help provide that relief without being dark like a welding mask. So anyway, but all the other information up there, as well as the scientific background and sort of the papers and things that were used for research here, are all available up on the site, as well as our contact information to get a hold of our team and questions, or let what you think.
Awesome. Well, I think that that's super exciting, and I have definitely picked out a present for my father for Father's Day. So I think that this is going to be a great thing for him and a great thing for many people who suffer with migraines. So thank you so much for your time. I had a great time chatting and learning more about the innovation of eyewear. So
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'm happy to. It was to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.